Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Chris Lee. I'm the director of ACM System. And I think we have Waipahu High School here today. Thank you so much for coming. Our special guest is Susan Soon He Stanton. She's a local girl from Aiea. She got her start writing for Hawaii Theater for Youth.
Honolulu Theater for Youth.
Honolulu Theater for Youth. And now she writes for HBO. She wrote Moana Junior. She's got a lot of plays that she's going to talk about. And she writes for my favorite show, which maybe you haven't seen, is on HBO. It's called Succession. I just won the Emmy for
writing.
Which she writes for. I think next year it'll probably win a lot for the actors too.
Yeah.
But it's a big favorite show of the critics and a lot of people on the East Coast and West Coast and people in the business. Yeah. It's a brilliant, brilliant show. And we're going to show you some stuff, but there might be some bad words in the clips. But anyways, let's welcome Susan.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, so we're lucky to have you here and have you, I know where does your family live?
Yeah, so short drive.
Okay. But now you live where?
So I'm based in New York, but the writing room for Succession is in London. So I live about 7 months out of the year in New York, the rest in London, and then I kind of hop around. So I was in LA for a couple weeks last week, and I'll go to different places to do a play. So yeah, a little bit of a gypsy lifestyle.
So we'll let you talk about what a writer's room in a little bit. But one of the things that she told me that was very interesting in her career is that she got onto this incredibly popular and successful show writing plays in Pidgin. And that was really her start. So take us back to the beginning.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say that Hawaii is such a unique place. And I think that, when you watch TV and movies that there are just very few examples of, I think, where you see yourself reflected on the stage or on the screen, where it's like, like for me, as a hapa, I was like, I just never get to see that. I never get to see too many things where I feel like this represents like this really unique world where we're from, right? Like the reality that I know growing up. And so I think that was part of the impetus to start writing and just part of the journey of being a storyteller. And I think when I started writing, I have like a big family, and my grandfather and all of his fishing buddies would just talk around the dinner table, and I would just listen to them, and I would start writing down dialogue. And so the first play that I wrote was we did it at Kumukahua. It was called Whatever Happened to John Boy Quijano, and it was really inspired by, I guess, like my grandfather's death, but also just the story of my family in that time. And so I sent it off to NYU Tisch, and then I moved to New York at 17, and it was a really rough transition. I didn't have any winter coats or anything. It was like a tough time, and kind of stayed and worked my way from there. Kind of like pop back and forth, always tried to do plays about Hawaii, because I think that's where the most unique stories that I have to tell are.
So your first play, you were 17?
Yeah, it was a play that I started writing at the Honolulu Theater for Youth, had a writing program. So we were all in high school, and every Saturday we'd show up, and we would just work on, we'd all kind of like write our plays, and I ended up polishing up a play and sending it off as my portfolio application for college.
So did you always know you wanted to be a writer when even like elementary school and high school?
Not that. I mean, high school, which I think is pretty early. I mean, I feel like people figure out, like a lot of people start in acting or drawing and then find their way into graphics or animation. But I think when I started writing plays, everything just clicked and it felt really natural. And I think I kind of felt like, oh, this is the thing that I want to just keep pursuing forever.
Okay. Is that program still available that you did?
I don't think it is anymore. I think there's different writing programs, but Dan Kellen used to run it, and now he's been doing a lot of things in the South Pacific and all around. And yeah.
Anybody here want to be a writer? Think about writing? Enjoy writing?
Awesome.
That's great. So there are a lot of opportunities. One of the things is that you just have to find. Now you can just Google them. Right?
Yeah, and there's remote programs too. I mean, Kumukahua has classes, but there's also amazing writers who teach like remote residencies or classes where you can take it online, and that way, even if you're here and you can't find the class that's just the right fit here, you can still work with amazing teachers and writers like remotely, because it's a whole new era, right, in terms of reaching
So
people.
how many of you went to Honolulu Theater for Youth? Did they don't bring you in from Waipahu to that? It's by the Capitol. No? Okay. How many of you have heard of Kumukahua Theater? So that's all local playwrights, right?
Yeah, so Kumukahua, it's their 50th season next year, so it's like one of the oldest theaters for like theaters of color in the country, and they only do stories that are about Hawaii people, and so it's a really special place. And I know not everyone goes to see the theater, but it is a way where you get to see, amazing stories and just stuff that might really resonate on stage. Yeah.
So what was the story of John Boy Quijano? I don't remember that story.
Yeah, it was about a man who hanais his son to a woman that he can't prove exists, and it kind of looks at a lot of mythology, and also kind of like, what do you do when some people believe the dad, some people believe the mom, and it's kind of how a family becomes schismed in that way. And it's about a large family and a lot of cousins, a lot of siblings, and so it was just one of those big family plays. Everything was set in a garage that had like the dinner table in it, and like everyone's like peeling shrimp and constantly eating and bickering. And so there's a lot of scenes where there's 8 people on stage the whole time, and everyone's talking kind of at once in these different moments, just to kind of create, I guess, the dinners that I grew up with all my cousins, and just the energy of it and the food and the joking, and then also finding like the more tragic moments in that too. Yeah.
But it was based on a real story?
It was very, very loosely inspired, but
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. And then what happened after that?
After
You
that,
went off to New York?
yeah, so yeah, I went to New York. And when I graduated in New York, I got really lucky. I got a big grant that I just applied for it, and it was a feature film development grant. So they give you an amount of money, and then you go try to get a film made. It was with the Sloan Foundation, and so I was 21 years old, and they handed me a big check, and they're like, "Go make your movie." And I was like, "I'm set. I've done it. I'm already arrived." And I spent the next 4 or 5 years trying to get this movie made, and it was about Rosalind Franklin, who's a Jewish female scientist who was supposedly to get. She was very close to getting the double helix shape discovered, but her work was kind of taken without her knowledge. And then she also died really young because she was using a lot of radiation to analyze the structure. So, she was kind of robbed of acknowledgement. So I spent 4 or 5 years working on that. We got really close. We got some people really interested. And then the recession happened, and nobody wanted to make a period piece about a scientist. And so this thing that I had put all my eggs in and worked so hard on just fell apart. And I was really sad, and I was jaded, and I was frustrated. But I was, 25, and I was like, it's a little bit too young to be jaded. So I applied to grad school, and I went to Yale School of Drama. I don't know if you guys know, Lupita Nyong'o was there when I was there. It's 3 writers a year, 3 directors a year, and 16 actors. Really wonderful program for theater and also for film. Terrell McCraney, who wrote Moonlight, if you guys have seen it, he was there. So it was just an amazing time. And I was there for 3 years, and I think it was a really focused time of just like writing and creating. And then when I graduated from there, I just moved back to New York and started doing more theater. Yeah.
So that's how we met, through David Henry Huang, who
Yeah.
I was an undergrad and he was at the drama school at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Right, yeah. And then you worked at a hotel.
Yeah. So
For how long?
10 years. So one thing that I think people don't want to tell you is that, and it's no secret, but it's really hard to make a living in the arts, and especially in theater, but also in film too. When you're between jobs, it's. I think everyone thinks it's kind of like 1, 2, 3, or like getting an agent or becoming, famous, or just getting the job. Like, it takes a really long time. I think especially if you don't come very connected. I think if you are a writer, an actor, a creator of color, I think it just takes longer for people to take chances on you. And so I had a lot of chances, but I also had a lot of struggle. And I also needed a flexible schedule because, I would go away to do a play, or I go away to do a film, and so you can't work a 9 to 5 job where you're salaried and you only get 10 vacation days a year. So I worked in a hotel as I worked at a hotel restaurant for a number of years, and it was a flexible schedule, so that I could leave for 2 or 3 months and come back, and they would let me do that. And it was tough. It was one of those things of like, it wasn't my favorite place to work. It was really physically hard work. You'd start working at 4 a.m. and all these kinds of things. But I was still a writer. You know, it was always to try to make it as a writer. And so I was constantly, if I saw a crazy thing happen or a memorable hotel guest, you know, I would write things down. I had those little pads of paper that they give out in hotels, and I have an accordion file that's maybe 8 inches thick of just all these different stories and people that I interviewed or people that I met during those 10 years that I just kept accumulating, because I'm a storyteller and I would find the stories and I couldn't help but, you know, take them in.
So being in Hawaii, a lot of us work in hotels. I worked at the Sheraton Waikiki and the Princess Kailani, but I didn't write a play about it. You wrote a play about it.
Yeah. So I wrote a play called We the Invisibles, and it takes a look at the hotel industry and also immigration, and just I started to interview different hotel workers that are, you know, had come in from all around the world and got their amazing stories. And it also takes a look at a story where Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who is the head of the International Monetary Fund, so someone who was running to become president of France, sexually assaulted a hotel maid, but because she was a West African immigrant and the lawyers thought she lied about her immigration, they said, well, she's just a liar, period, so she must be lying about all these other things. So that was very disturbing to me, and I felt injustice in that. And so the play is about finding the truth about this and finding the integrity of immigrants and capturing their stories. And then like that accordion file came into use, and I started to pick up different memories from that. And so it's kind of a complicated play. We just did it at Koa Theater, which is in Kailua, and we did it, it's happening in LA, and it happened at Actors Theater of Louisville, which is a big theater in Louisville, Kentucky. So started to bring those things together, and then I just optioned it to be turned into a TV show. And so that's been really exciting, is to try to bring all of these memories and stories to life and keep kind of like building it out and trying to share it with a wider and wider audience.
I saw the show over on Kaneohe side at Hawaii Low Theater, and I love the show, but I was really impressed by the performances. And I'm curious how the performances here, because all local actors, they're all basically unpaid, I assume. Or,
yeah, they didn't. It was really like a labor of love for them, and I think there were 8 actors, and
they play like
100 roles.
They play 100 different parts, the same 8 actors, and they have to keep changing their clothes, and they're constantly going on and off stage, and they have to set extra clothes or something like that. At
they're
different
moving.
Places
Yeah,
backstage.
they're just running everywhere, and they also are doing all kinds of accents. So for people that want to be actors, it's like, oh, I've never done an Estonian accent or a Bengali accent, and they had to go and they would do accent research and figure out how to do those different accents. So they're really extraordinary. I was very lucky with that ensemble.
How many people here want to be actors? Who's that? They're really trying. Taika Waititi, who did Boy and Thor and his new movies, Jojo Rabbit. He's doing this movie here about the Samoan football team, and they're putting out these flyers endlessly to try to get extras for it. So, and they're actually casting out of Waianae. So, if any of you are interested, I would go check it out, because Taika's a great guy. First of all, I'm sure it'll be as much as fun it can be being an extra.
Yeah.
But it's a paid gig too. So, and they definitely want people that are from the islands for the background and everything like that. And I think they just announced the guy who's playing the Swedish or the Norwegian coach who coaches them.
Oh, wow.
And it's like one of the X-Men guys. Is Magneto? I think it's Magneto. Huh?
Yeah.
It's somebody like that. It's a really big actor's playing that part, So, So that's going on now. Anyway, it's just a little tip if any aspiring actors out there, it's a paid job.
It's also just really fun, even if you're not an actor, to be on a movie set, because it's a city, like the trucks and moving and the effects.
Yeah.
There's nothing really like the magic of seeing a movie made. It's kind of overwhelming just to take it all in. So even if you're not interested in acting and you want to be an extra, it's kind of an unforgettable experience. It's a long day, but it's really fun. Yeah.
How many of you have seen Moana, the movie? Okay,
Aw.
good. So one of her gigs is she has adapted, it's called Moana Junior
Uh-huh.
for Disney, and tell us about that process.
Yeah, it was really fun. I think they wanted a writer from Hawaii to work on it, and so we took the film and there's a lot of action sequences and there's a lot of things that are tricky. So we had to figure out how to translate this animated movie into a play that could be performed by just people with minimal sets sometimes on stage and shorten the length of it.
Down to like an hour?
An hour, yeah.
1 hour.
So we had to compress it. But, it's such a beautiful story, and the music is incredible. And so it's been really fun to kind of it's like a puzzle of like, okay, I can't take this out, but I have to shorten it. I have to move these things around. And then we were working with Lin-Manuel Miranda, so there's a new song in there that was cut from the movie that we have in the play, because I cut the Kakamori because it was just too difficult. So we had a space, so we put in a new song that he had written. So.
Well, they're up on the ocean, I guess.
Yeah, it's called Warrior Face, and it's when they're battling the monsters. And it's
okay.
like Maui's trying to teach Moana how to take on all of these crazy things in the land of the monsters. So it's fun.
So that kind of brought you back to your Honolulu Theater for Youth days?
Yeah. One of the plays I wrote for HTY was called Navigator, and we worked with the Polynesian Voyaging Society, and we worked with Mapuana and her halau. We did original melee, and we worked with real science and navigational techniques but made it a play for kids. And so I did that first, and then I think that helped convince Disney to bring me on to be the adapter.
Okay.
Yeah, because I got to train with them on the water, and it was really, really amazing.
So I want to talk about my favorite television show. I know a lot of people haven't seen it because it's on HBO, but it's almost the end of the second season already, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a third season.
Yeah.
But you write it in London or something?
We write it, so I don't know if you guys know, so in terms of the way TV shows are made, there's a head writer called the showrunner, and he or she has the in our case, our showrunner, Jesse Armstrong, is a man. So he's a British writer, and so he wanted his room to be in London. And he has a team of writers, so I think there were 7 of us, and we wrote the 10 episodes all together. And so we would sit together just around a table. I don't know if you guys have ever seen 30 Rock, where there's a table of comedy writers kind of sitting around a table looking slouchy. That's kind of what we do. We sit around a table and we're like, maybe this could happen, maybe that could happen. And then we just start to create characters and story, and then we start to piece them together. And so our whole room was just covered in pieces of paper everywhere of different story ideas, episode ideas, characters, and then eventually episodes would get assigned. So I wrote episode 6, season 1 and season 2, and I would do little bits of writing on other episodes as well. And so we all kind of wove this really complicated tapestry together over and it's unlike a movie, it's 10 hours, it's 10 episodes, so it's 10 hours of storytelling, which is a lot, but that it feels quick as you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, so if you're writing the 6th episode, you're kind of like a very key episode, I would think, in terms of where the story's going in the second half and everything.
Yeah, it was a hinge point episode, and the most surreal thing for me, I think, so when I write a play, a lot of it's kind of simple, or there's a set, but when you write something as a TV or movie, you get the real thing. So I wrote a scene with helicopters, and then there were actual helicopters. And there's a dramatic scene where a man he's late for an important meeting, and there's a lot of traffic, and he has to run through a highway tunnel. And so HBO paid to close down the tunnel so people are trying to get back and forth from New Jersey into New York, and this highway tunnel is blocked off. So from Google Maps, you can just see this red. And it was because I thought it would be dramatic to do that, and commuters are inconvenienced. So I said, hundreds of people are inconvenienced because of my imagination. And our showrunner, Jesse, was like, that's the dream. That's the dream of writing, is to just be able to, do that kind of thing. So that was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. It was just seeing, and that's why I said being on a set is so cool. It's just the scale of it. There are hundreds of extras and all these different things. And even when they're in their offices, every little detail, the water bottles are branded, a pen that a secretary is holding in the background of the scene that you would never notice had the company brand name, all the details, all these different kinds of the, props and actors' costume, the whole village of people are just doing their best work to make everything feel as real as possible.
So we have branded water here, ACM, thanks to Charla. We're very detail-oriented here, too. So if you don't know anything about the show, it's sort of based on a guy named Rupert Murdoch, because the original script was called Murdoch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it was a film script or something.
It was a film
right?
script, yeah.
Right. And Rupert Murdoch is the guy that came from Australia and built Fox Network and bought the Fox Studios, and really has changed the world in a lot of interesting ways, and also has multiple marriages and multiple children from those marriages.
Yeah.
So the story is also a little bit like a very famous play by Shakespeare called King Lear, where the king is dying and he's deciding who's going to take over. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, I think there's three brothers from one marriage, or two brothers.
There's
from one?
there's an older brother from the first marriage.
Yeah.
And then there's two older
Played
brothers.
by
and
Alan Ruck,
Alan
who
Ruck.
was the hapless friend in
Ferris Bueller's
Day Off.
He was Cameron in Ferris Bueller's Day
Yeah.
Off.
If you've ever seen Ferris Bueller, it's a great film. You should watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's Kendall.
There's Kendall, who's the oldest brother of the young, and he's kind of like the heir apparent. He's the one that he's been training for the job his whole life, and he's told in the pilot that it won't be him. And so in my episode, he's been so frustrated that he's trying to overthrow his father because he wasn't given the keys to the kingdom. So now he's trying to, break down the walls of the castle with a battering ram, essentially, and betray his father. The middle brother is played by Kieran Culkin, just like Macaulay Culkin's younger brother, who's a great actor. And he's kind of feckless. He's sort of a flip-flopper, and he sides with his brother secretly, but then in front of his dad, he has a hard time figuring out how to stand up to his father. And the youngest one is Shiv, who's played beautifully by Sarah Snook, and she's kind of like the baby of the family, but she's very cunning, and she's a political consultant, and she kind of has never been asked to step forward or be in the company, in part because she thinks her father has sexism and doesn't take her seriously, even though by many people's accounts, she's the smartest and most capable one. Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to show us something, maybe the
Just
making
the first
of
one?
your episode or
yeah,
something?
so this is
Do
just,
that?
it's very out of context. There's a couple of, I'm actually pretty positive, a couple of F-bombs in there, so I apologize. It's HBO, there's a lot of swearing. And this is just the behind-the-scenes making of the episode that was just on, that HBO put out.
So do we have any questions from the audience at this point? And you can ask her anything, but I mean, I think this is a really inspirational story because I think you were telling me, what was the play that got you to, because of your one play, got you to this gig? And
Yeah, so, I think it's also like just being from here, or there's a sense of like, I don't know if you know the imposter syndrome, when you sort of feel like, well, who am I? Or there's this person seems to know better, or I'm too young, or there's a sense that you're kind of waiting for permission for things. And I think that if you listen to those voices, it can keep you back. And so I think it took me a long time to really just pursue my dreams like full force. And also there's other people that you have that you can make connections with. I mean, anything you do, right? You have your friends, you have your teachers, you have your colleagues that can help, like a tide rises all boats, and you can bring each other up. And so there is I would go to LA and take all these meetings, and Christine Kim is an executive who works at HBO, and she's from Hawaii too. And, we're both Korean, and so we're like, hey. And she really liked a play of mine that was set here, and, part of it was in Pidgin. It's called #I'm Bad at This. They did it at Kumukuhua. It got the Po'okela. And it was just all about, like, what it means to be a young millennial in Honolulu. There's so many things in Hawaii where it's like there's a beach, or, there's no beaches in this play. Like, there's Staten Island Access Road, but there's no that. And so it's just kind of like what it means to be a young urban person in Hawaii, where everyone thinks of Hawaii as being a paradise. And it's like, well, what does it mean when you actually live here and work here, and when you want to create something artistic? So Christine liked my play, and so she sent it to her bosses, who were the producers for HBO. They liked it. They sent it. So I kept sort of like jumping through a series of really scary hoops. And then finally it got to Jesse, who was the person who was speaking, who was the showrunner. And he told me he was looking for someone who could write sad comedy. which the play is kind of that. And I think he just liked my writing, even though the play was set in Hawaii and it wasn't about business in any way at all. He was kind of like, if you're smart and you work hard, you can write about anything. So we all just did a lot of research. Like first day of Succession, I was kind of like, what's a stock? And then by the end, we kind of all went through a business school boot camp where we learned how to write about very complicated things. 'Cause that's the beauty of writing, is that as long as you do the research, you can create anything, right? So you really put your mind to it. So that was kind of how it went. I was living in New York and a university professor, and also still working in the hotel because I had a lot of student loans. And my agent called me and said, hey, how do you feel about London? I was like, oh, I like London. And a week later, I quit my teaching job. I left my students stranded. It was a little stressful. And I was in London working with HBO, and it changed my life in a single week. Everything really transformed, and Succession has helped me create my own shows that I'm working on, and work for, Showtime and Amazon and Netflix. And, I think once people trust you, you get to have a lot more opportunities. It takes a long time for one person to say, oh, you're okay. And then after that, a lot of people will take a chance on you. So it went from fighting to now a lot of opportunities, and I'm really grateful for that.
So the reason that we originally met is because I was watching it, and on the show, they actually had prominent Asian American characters on it, and I wrote a tweet about it. And then my friend David Henry Huang, who's a very famous playwright, said, oh, I know the writer. And she's from Hawaii, and I think she's amazing. So that's how small the world is, and that's how little of a little effort you have to make to just put it out there when you like something or appreciate something, and then get some sort of response back from it,
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I am really curious if any of you have any questions for her. Yeah.
What was some of the difficulty with writing other?
Yeah, I think, so that's such a good question, because when you're a playwright, it's totally your voice. You get to write by yourself. And then when you're writing, so this show is very different from my own voice. And so it's kind of, I read the original script really carefully, and I listened to it, and I diagrammed it. So I looked at every single scene in the pilot, which is the first episode, and said, okay, there are this many story beats in each act. And then you get to come without a lot of ego. So you come in, you're like, I have an idea that's great, and then you present it, and then maybe nobody thinks it's great. And you're like, okay, that's fine. And so I think especially the first couple months when I was working, I was very intimidated, and it was a lot of listening and a lot of learning, and then finally being able to feel like you could speak up. A lot of the writers, I was one of 2 Americans. I was the youngest writer. Everyone was British and really accomplished, and it felt just like, I don't know, like maybe being at MIT or Harvard, or just like I'm in a really scary place, and everyone's nice, but they're so smart and intimidating, and just figuring out they're brilliant comedy writers, and I think I'm more of a character-led writer. And then just saying, like, I was brought here for a reason, and my reason for being here is different than someone else. And so I was always known, I know New York well, so I helped that part of the show. And I think even like working in a hotel or seeing the super rich people with more like working blue-collar people, like that helped a lot of scenes. And then just trusting that I had something of value, and trying not to compare myself with the other writers, and just say, like, I'm a part of this unit, and how do I serve the best good of it? And it takes a minute, but also it's like it happens in stages. So the first 4 months, we just talk, and then we start to build it. And then when you're at the episode is your own writing. So then you do get to kind of like express yourself in different ways. And I would write little jokes. There's a joke about the Honolulu International Airport in episode 2 that I was really proud of. I was like, getting it in there, That was fun. And I'll always push for more characters of color, and also larger parts, or parts for Asian American writers or Asian American actors and performances. That's a big, not very transparent mission of mine when I'm in the room. I'll even give characters more ethnic names sometimes, just to help, or sometimes I'll help with the casting breakdown, while I'll remind the casting director, like, please think about this role diversely, and I'll send it for every part that I can, just to really remind these casting directors, like, give us lots of options, because sometimes their go-to is just a sea of handsome white 28-year-old men, and it's like, no, more, please, more options,
Well, most people think our airport is a joke. so I can understand.
Oh, it's about the flowers, beautiful flowers.
No, I know. It actually has its charms. I read an article that I think it said that they brought in consultants to teach the writers how the rich are different.
Yes. So we had a wealth consultant who's lovely, and there's just ways in which I think people are rich that are beyond imagination, where you're like, I didn't realize rich people had that going for them, or you'd have personal shoppers, or, and she would tell horror stories. Even, so in season 2, they go back to their summer house, and she's like, oh, well, you put the furniture in storage. The solitary doesn't hurt your furniture. So their whole house, all their furniture a company comes and takes their expensive art and furniture out of the house. And they wrap all their hedges in burlap. And all these kinds of things you'd never imagine that in the summertime. Not only do they leave their house after Labor Day, but they take everything out of it. And that's really expensive. Like their whole house is cleared out.
Helicopters differently.
Oh, yes. Yes. I forgot about that. So one of our wealth consultants said people are getting in and out of helicopters differently. So if you've never been in a helicopter before, most people would kind of like stoop out because that's very human. But if you ride a helicopter every day, it's like you know how to get in and out of a car. They know how to get in and out of a helicopter. So the actors practiced getting in and out of a helicopter. So it was just every day. And also in New York in the winter, it's really cold. You wear many layers and a scarf, but they're driven everywhere by their driver. So they're only walking about 10 feet anywhere at any given moment. So they don't have a heavy coat. They have, if it's winter, they don't wear a winter coat. They'd wear a light fall coat, And we had a scene with umbrellas, and New York City, it's crowded. Everyone has a small umbrella because you're fighting through the crowd. And they gave him a golf umbrella, because it's kind of like rich people, it's like he doesn't care that his umbrella is taking up half the street because he doesn't think about it, right? He just has an enormous umbrella, so rain won't touch him. And that was ways in which we showed their privilege that they weren't even aware of. The way that they move through the world is different than the way, everyone else does.
Yeah.
And they don't even see it.
Yeah, I don't know if this was your episode this season, but there's like this sort of convention of rich people or something?
Yeah.
That was yours?
That was me, yeah.
Oh, okay. What was that about?
So it was based on Sun Valley. So there's a media conference, and it's not filmed, and Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and all these famous billionaires, it's a billionaire summer camp is the nickname for it. So we had to create our version of it. So I did a lot of research on what the real versions of those were, and then make up a fake version.
This is like the Allen and Company gathering?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's like Sun Valley, there's Davos. It's like these media conferences.
Yeah.
And people do billion-dollar deals that affect the entire world while they're walking to the golf course together. And it's kind of unimaginable, all these different people that that you've heard of just right up next to each other, plus famous fashion designers and celebrities. They're just all mixed in together. It's maybe like 400 people of the top influencers on the planet will go there. So it's pretty crazy. It's hard to create it, but it's a very strange environment. And people don't talk about it. So I had to sort of go through channels to try to get people to tell me what it's like. And my cousin works for a big boss, and he was like, I asked him, but he said he wouldn't talk to you, but here's some things that he told me. And, like people were very secretive about what it was actually like. It was kind of wild. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
What's the most absurd thing you've heard from the wealth consultant?
Oh, gosh. Where do I begin? So we did an episode on a yacht, and they have these people that they call the elves, which I thought was pretty disgusting. It's all of the yacht staff, and they're meant to never be seen. So they're magic-like elves, and when you go to up above deck, they clean your room, and they even clean up the makeup. So if you have a compact of powder, they'll clean the edge of it to make the makeup look perfect. Even though it's not their makeup, they clean everything and lay it all out. They figure out what your favorite foods are. There was a story about how they're in Sri Lanka, but they were flying in fresh seafood from Japan every single day on the helicopter, on the yacht. They don't want to read the news on an iPad, so they have a machine on the yacht that prints out full copies of all their papers. And it's a big machine just so they have the feeling of a newspaper while they're at sea. And they had a full like massage and spa and just everything, like anything you could possibly need. Also, there was like a pool, even though they're right off of the ocean, it's like they have that, and just like anything you could imagine, these super luxury yachts. Yeah.
There's an episode called Boars on the Floor or something.
Yeah.
That wasn't yours, but
That was based on an experience that I saw. So I was at a writing retreat in Texas, and next to the writing retreat, there was a place where Shell Oil executives would go deer hunting, and these executives were not very good at hunting, and so they had a salt lick, and they would hide behind the salt lick and almost shoot these deer point blank. And I was like, this is what rich people do. They have these experiences. So we translated that because it was not hunting season to Hungary, and it was boar hunting. So
yeah. But I mean, the boars had no.
they were just,
it was
yeah,
horrible.
it was horrible.
It was
Yeah, it was.
horrible.
I mean, it's pretty grim, but
It's
that's
literally like shooting fish in a barrel.
it was shooting, yeah, fish,
You know,
shooting
with a
animals
boar,
in a
yeah,
barrel.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the show tries to do is not, I think there's a lot of people that are like, why do we care about these really privileged, kind of terrible rich people? And on some level, it's like, you shouldn't really care about them. But they're also a family, and so there are ways in which we see how they're a real family. And we also, we're pretty unkind to them. We're pretty tough on them. And so we try to show that the elf thing, if you're experiencing the luxury of it, you're like, oh, this is so nice. But from where we're standing, it's like, no, that's really terrible. Like, why would you need people to do that for you? And so we try to make fun and show their privilege and their grotesqueness.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the show is everybody's a horrible human being. I mean, that's across the entire cast. I mean, every character. I mean, I like Shiv,
Yeah.
but even she's not somebody I would want to hang out with. But she's just like the best of the least.
The
or
best of the worst.
The
Yeah.
best of the worst. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Other questions? We have a few minutes left. Yes.
How do the writers keep dynamic between episodes, keep that continuity of, I guess, characters?
So that's a great question. So we have these kind of like arcs, and sometimes it's kind of like, well, where do we want? So for season 1, Kendall, he's the one over there on the far left. He's the brother that kind of fails. So we wanted to have him start at kind of a high and then end, and then really seem like he's going to win this fight, and then it starts his decline. And so sometimes we almost like map it. If you think about like if every character is a dot, where do they emotionally highs and lows episode by episode? You could almost graph out their wins and losses as they have their arc. Shiv in season 1 was kind of on the outside, and then in season 2 she's beginning to get into the company, and so she's growing her power, and so she's kind of on the rise, but then she'll make a mistake and then she'll take a dive. So there's one of the behind the scenes of the show evaluates the characters like stock, which is actually kind of accurate, where it's like who's winning, who's losing,
Like the
episode
stock
by
exchange.
Stock exchange, yeah. Like if these guys are all stocks, like who's
up
doing
and
better or
down.
worse episode by episode, which is something kind of funny for us to think about, because we just try to weave them together in different ways and create dynamics. And they're so competitive. Like all these siblings, the 4 of them, if they team together, they could beat their father in a week. And but they can't help but fight for his love, and so they always self-defeat each other, or they
That's really all they want. They want the love of their
Their
father.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the core of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken always reminds me of Donald Trump Jr. He looks like him a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up in the back, yes.
Thank you for coming. And I wanted to ask you about the women in the business. Have you seen, when you first entered, have you seen an explosion of more women participating in your particular field?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be. I mean, there's a long way to go, and there are times in which, but the shows I've been on, I've been one of like the room has been half men, half women, which is really encouraging. And there's a thing called Equal Rider when Frances McDormand won the Oscar last year.
Equality Writer.
Equality Rider, yeah.
Yes.
So that's where you want to have men and women on your team. So we have female directors. Directing is a very male field generally, but we have female directors. We have a female camera operator, and these cameras are heavy.
They're
so
heavy.
during lunch break, we're like, have lunch with us. And she's like, I have to go work out. And we're like, why? And she has to physically like lift weight so she can carry safely the camera pack.
Yeah.
We have female grips that do, lighting, and just across the board, we have women assistant directing as well. And it's really inspiring to see how many women there are. And some of them are like, I was the only one, or I'd never seen so many women even 10 years ago. And so our show, that's one of the things that they try to do as a cultural thing, is just to make sure that there's a lot of inclusion when possible, and to try to create opportunities. And so I feel very lucky to be a part of that. And it's a really healthy place to work in that sense. It's really inspiring. Yeah.
You're working in London, so you met Phoebe?
What was that?
You're working in
Oh, Phoebe
London, so you
Waller.
met Phoebe.
Oh,
Fleabag.
yeah. She's great. Yeah, I saw her at the Emmys, and that was really cool. She was like, she couldn't even hold all of her Emmys.
This is
Yeah.
the writer of Fleabag, which is on Amazon. It's a BBC show, and she also writes Killing Eve. I think she did a draft of the James Bond movie too.
Yeah, she
right?
she has a new show coming up on HBO that I wanted to write on, but I couldn't because it was while they were shooting my episode of Succession.
Okay.
But yeah, I almost got to work with her, which would have been fun.
Yeah, she's incredibly versatile and brilliant. Yeah. Are British people really intimidating because they're so brilliant and they talk that way?
British people, it's a little bit of a cultural nightmare because it feels like we're speaking the same language, but it's not. And there's so many ways in which I didn't understand all the things I was doing very badly. So in England, I thought that if I said, "Oh, if I saw a friend's play, I said, "Oh, your play is quite good," and they'd be like, "Oh no, it's not that great. I'm sorry. I was like, I just complimented you. What?" And apparently, quite good, I thought meant the same thing as very good, but to British people, quite good means bad. And so
Oh.
I thought I was qualifying as it's even better than good. But to them, it means that quite means bad. So anyway, that was something I learned like 6 months into my time going
Okay.
back and forth there. And I was like, oh gosh, I keep making these mistakes. So there's always kind of social mistakes that I make that I'll never really understand. But they're really nice, and I love being there. I mean, the culture. Also, it's really fun to work in Europe. I feel like as an American, there aren't that many opportunities to work abroad, and like Paris is an hour away. So there's some times where I'm like, this is really cool. Like I get to, see more of Europe, and especially being from Hawaii, like I never traveled growing up. It's just we're so far. So just to be able to do that, it's much less expensive once you're there. So it's really cool.
The actress who plays Shiv, she's Australian,
She's Australian.
and another one of the actors is British, right?
Matthew McFadden, who was on the Pride and Prejudice as Mr. Darcy, he plays Shiv's husband on the show.
And you cannot. Their accents are. I mean, I don't understand why these Australians and British actors can do flawless American accents.
Yeah.
But then, we send Madonna over there, and she comes back, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't. It sounds like me when I try to do a British accent or something.
Yeah, I think because filmmaking is so strong in the U.S. that they all went to acting school and they're really trained on how to do American accents. And it's funny because when Sarah gets tired, like sometimes we shoot until 5 a.m, and about 2 a.m. her accent starts to slip. She'll start to say words more like an Australian. And there's a script supervisor. There's a woman who with a clipboard, and she'll watch every take, and then Sarah knows herself well enough as an actor, like warn me when everything starts sounding a little Aussie, and then we'll say, oh, you're saying this word in an Australian way, and then she'll correct it. Because I think it's tough to be able to do it consistently. Yeah.
Okay. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yes.
If you could go back in time and see your high school self, what advice would you give her?
Man, that's a good question. I think I was so anxious. I think that for me, like as a kid, that just really, I really wanted to be a writer, and I was really anxious. And I think when you're in school, right, like you get the gold star, you get the A, and I think I was always chasing the kind of like pat on the head. And I think I thought, if I do this, then this. I thought it was really kind of like A to B. So for me, I thought, oh, if I study hard enough in high school, I'll get into a good college. And so when I went to NYU Tisch, I was like, oh, the Coen brothers went here, and all these amazing filmmakers. That means that I'll immediately become like a screenwriter. And it took me like 13 more years and this whole other route. And so I guess I would just say that I would tell myself to kind of like keep working hard, but don't get consumed by it. Try not to get so jealous of your friends, because everyone's kind of going for it, and just sort of like do your best work, and just know that it'll happen one way or the other if you just keep trying to do your best work and build up your craft. And there's no formula for it. There's no way, if you don't get the thing that you want, that you're a failure. There's a lot of, and also there's so many different ways of doing things now. Like there's people that shoot a movie on their phone, and it makes it into huge festivals. Like there's so many different ways for you guys in your generation that I didn't have growing up. There's so many more options and ways you can do media and tell stories in all kinds of ways. So if someone tells you, oh, you didn't get this, so you're not an artist, or you're not whatever you want to pursue, like that person is not only wrong, but afraid of you. They're insecure. Like, they don't really want you to succeed. So if anyone tells you no, it's like, there's always another way through. There's always a window, right? Even if this official doorway seems like the way. That's, I guess, my biggest takeaway that I tell my very anxious high school self.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Have you managed to meet anyone you looked up to when you first started writing?
Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, I think especially in theater. I mean, we mentioned David Henry Wong, who is an amazing playwright. I think also just like growing up in Hawaii, I was really interested in theater, so I read all these different writers. I mean, like, I just got to meet Taika, and that was really cool because I really appreciate what he's doing in terms of like just like Polynesian and Pacific storytelling. So I've gotten to meet, and I also got to work with some actors who I've always really looked up to in that sense or admired. But mostly for me, like just as a playwright, I got to study with writers that I love. So like, I don't know if you guys know them, but like Paula Vogel or John Guare, Jose Rivera. And the really comforting thing was that as I got older and worked more, and then also just lived in New York and spent time, it's a small group of people that want to be playwrights. And so, you know, people that I would read in high school and college then became my friends and my mentors. And a lot of them are really good at kind of like sending the elevator back down, like being a resource for younger writers. Like David is incredible at being a resource for younger writers and, you know, like introduce us, but also sent me so many different opportunities. So it's really nice when people that you admire are also really good people that are open to helping you. And that was also a really welcome surprise, just to feel like, oh, I can talk to you, and we can also have a relationship and a friendship.
Okay, well, we're so grateful that you could stop by, and I know you did Gary's class
Yeah.
as well. We're very grateful to all of you from Waipahu, because I know you had to come on the bus to come here today, and we really appreciate that. Are you all in early college? So are you thinking
Yeah.
about coming to UH West Oahu? Yes? Because
Yeah.
right over there is a new building that's going to be open when you, I don't know what grades you are, what are they, seniors?
For
What?
9 through 12, right?
Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
going to be opening our one, you just took a tour,
Yeah.
and you said it's better than NYU.
It's better than, like, so when I was in high school, this kind of facility, this program in general, but this new facility didn't exist. And like, I felt like when I was in high school looking at colleges, like mainline was the only option. There's a lot of people, like when you know, Hawaii is, again, it's so unique, it's such a special place. And now there's a way that you can work in a world-class facility with professors and there's resources. Like there are top film schools that don't have what you guys are building right now. Like I was getting a construction tour and my eyes were watering behind the construction goggles because, you know, there's like Foley, there's sound, there's all kinds of design opportunities for work. There's a movie screen. I mean, you can say better than me, but these kinds of facilities are rare and it's top of the line and it's built with such consideration for how to teach and how to teach film and filmmaking and different kinds of media. So, I mean, this is amazing and it's coming up just next year, right?
Yeah, fall 2020.
Yeah.
We call it the Kingdom of Charla. So we all hope you will consider coming on here to UH West Oahu, and I know that you will all have great careers if you do. So let's say thank you to Susan Stanton for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Good plug.